Hey, welcome to another Retirement Readiness Thursday. Dre Griggs, founder of Obsidian Wisdom. Appreciate you giving me some of your time this evening. We're actually going to mix it up a little bit today. We're going to talk a little bit about how economics and the flow of money and how we ultimately why we would build multiple streams of income. When I have conversations with people, 99% of the time, it really has to do with this discomfort around money. Do I have enough? Do I need to save it? Where do I invest it? I don't want to lose it. Should I spend it? And whether we have the fear of not having enough so we don't spend it. I think I just saw something today that had said 1 out of 4 Americans said that they're living paycheck to paycheck. Or we're talking about the cost of things that are going up, where it's tied to the tariffs and different things, where it's like, do I have to make changes in my spending habits? I'm spending on the same stuff, but for some reason the dollar isn't going as far as it used to. And when I really think about it, most of the time we're basically saying, I don't want to mess it up. Like that's really what we're trying to say. Like I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to mess this up. I like the idea of separating my time from my money. I don't want to buy an asset and then it gets messed up. How do I know that I can make these good decisions? And I was actually having a conversation with a client, and they were talking about the like, hey, you can't predict the future. And in many ways, I push back at that because I do feel you can economically predict the future in a lot of ways because the cycles are the cycles, the ebbs and the flows, that it happens the exact same way over and over. It would be almost like saying you can't predict the sunrise in some ways, where you're like, well, we sort of can actually, like we really can. And so I did want to spend a little bit of time with you all today, and we would go through some of those examples. I did see, so there was an interview the president had done, and they were talking about the price of coffee and how the price of coffee had gone up a lot. And the president himself, and I don't even know if he realized he had said it, he was saying, well, we're going to lower some of those tariffs. And that was a big thing. Like it became kind of like newsworthy. I don't, right, economically, it's not newsworthy, but it was newsworthy in the sense that it was like the first time that we openly admitted there was a correlation between tariffs and prices, right? But this, economically speaking, that is what it is. So, a fun fact or a fun question for you: coffee made in the United States. Do you know where coffee is made in the United States? Right? Fun fact. So, coffee in the United States is in Hawaii. That our coffee comes from Hawaii in the United States. And if you ever bought anything from Hawaii, you know it's actually kind of expensive. Whether you traveled there and you were there for a little bit, or whether you got stuff from there, right? Same with Alaska. When there's a lot of logistical challenges, you recognize the prices go a little different. California has actually started trying to make coffee, but people don't like the taste of California coffee yet. So coffee right now still comes majority from South America. So we have the tariffs and the price, and we'll go through that. But the idea isn't really to do anything other than recognizing the pattern so we can make better decisions for ourselves. And so we're going to talk about the flow of money, and we're going to talk about how you create that flow for yourself and how that pattern works for you, and that you're able to make these decisions. So at the very beginning of it, so we're going to have 3 goals, right? So I like to always set the standard. You will understand the flow of money, and we'll identify where that flow is and where we sit at in that flow. So let's go ahead and get started, because a lot of times we feel like there's money always around me. I don't think I'm that irresponsible with my money, and yet the money doesn't seem to stay with me that long. So economically, we recognize that every single society has people, right? So we have people and we have businesses that you and I will go and meet these businesses in 2 markets where we interact. And so one of them we would end up saying is the finished goods market. So we'll say it's finished. And the other one, we'll say it's the raw materials. So you and I will go work and we'll cut down some trees, right? So forgive my trees. I know they don't look good. I probably should have changed the color. That would have probably helped me. And so we give our time. That's my clock. Ugh, even my clock is messed up. I'm struggling today. And then we'll give the wood or the lumber to the business. And then they will give us the house. And then we get the house, right? So that's one flow. We have that cycle that goes around. I am going to change the color because I know it's like, oh, you should change the color. Sure, I'll change the color. Well, we don't do that for free, right? We don't just do that for fun. We recognize that the business is then going to give us money for our time. And then we give the business the money for the house, and the business gets the money. Right? So circular flow of money, business gets money. We work at businesses, we own businesses. We trade money for goods, we trade time for money, and this is one of the flows of money. Now there are additional layers to this. We won't get too deep because I don't want to stress you out. But we do recognize that every single economic society will have a government, and all of our governments are different. That we're on a spectrum. That we have what we would call a command economy, which means the government owns everything. And then we have a capitalist society where the people own the stuff, right? We recognize that there is a spectrum. Almost everyone has a mixed economy because no one is pure capitalist, no one is pure communist, everybody has a mixture. And so the United States, right, is communist that the United States owns private parks, right? They own land in your country, right? They own land. You're like, well, it's a park. Okay, it's a park, but it's land that the government owns. You're like, okay, I can sort of see that, right? So they own some land. We recognize that the government owns a variety of different parts of our society. So they have a hand in healthcare. They have some of the laws that they dictate to us where it's like, hey, you have to have car insurance. You're like, well, what if I don't want it? Well, you have to have it. If you go hunting, they tell you what time of the year you can hunt certain animals. They tell you what size the fish has to be to keep it. There are lots of command aspects of our economy dictated to you by the government. You're like, oh, I never thought of it like that. All right, cool. We also have socialist aspects. You're like, wait a minute, Dre, now you're crossing the line. But if you call 911, do they ask you for a cash or credit card? They don't ask you for that. Why? Because it's a service provided by tax dollars, right? So you don't have to pay for an extra fire truck. They just send the fire truck. You don't have to pay for an extra police officer. They send a police officer. You don't have to actually have property taxes to send your kids to public school. You get hit by a bus on the way to work, they're not going to leave you on the street. Someone's going to call 911. They're going to pick you up, give you the surgery. If you have insurance, they'll bill you. If you don't have insurance, they'll write it off. Right? So it's a spectrum. Everything's across the board. We are definitely capitalist leaning, but we recognize that. So the role of the government changes depending on your country. So the United States, for the most part, our government is just supposed to make sure that we have a stable currency. That's number one. We need to believe that our money will maintain its value. Otherwise, we will not accept it, right? So at the end of the day, our dollar's value is super important. They want to make sure that they have economic growth. And so they will add certain policies to create economic growth. And then we decide based on this spectrum, how we want to go about implementing that. And then normally you want to have high employment. You want people to have jobs. Every country wants that. They just go differently doing that, right? So when you add tariffs, you charge the business. We'd say, of course, it's charged to the business. So instead of it being whatever, instead of them paying you $20,000, let's just say you're super expensive, they pay you $20,000 every house you build. They add a $10,000 tariff. As a business, you get to decide whether or not you want to pass that cost on or keep it. Without getting too crazy, the way we normally think of it is if it's something I need, then I just have to eat the cost. If it's something I don't need, then I will buy something else, right? Like that's basically the simplest way. If I double the price of your medicine that you need to live, then you're just going to pay double the price, right? You're like, I got to do what I got to do. Gas is one of those things. I have to fill up the tank. I make more money with a full tank than I do without a full tank. There's other things like cigarettes where they add a tax, which is what a tariff is, and then people smoke less because they added a tax to it. You don't need to smoke. You vape, you can have a nicotine patch, you can have the gum. There's lots of other options available, right? So high level. When you're looking at the flow of money, you have to decide where you fit in this flow and how many times the money comes to you, right? Because we recognize there's the business half and then there's the personal half of it. So then we're going to decide, how do I increase the amount of money that I have? And for you to increase the amount of money you have to increase how many times the money flows to you. And so we're going to add a couple of them. So we have the government's in there. The government does the different things. When you're looking at your country from a high level, let me switch back our color. So we're talking about the flow of money. We're going to use the country as a whole to make that decision. How we ultimately decide the flow of money. So our GDP will normally capture how much is normally going to be like this. We're not going to worry about this because you and I aren't a government, but the C is consumption. So that's you and me. So that's like consumers, basically. The I is investments. So that's going to be most likely for a business. And then we have our net of exports minus imports, right? So the exports is money that you get for selling goods. Imports is the money you send out to get goods. So we have the net of that, which means for the most part, you and I, we're going to keep track of basically three main things. We're going to keep track of the money that we get in, right? So for our flow of money, we're going to have the income. We would then keep track of how much we spend, and we would keep track of how much we invest. Right, so for everyone's flow of money, country, everything else, that's what we ultimately decide. We have the money that we spend as consumers, we have the income that we get, we have the investments that we make, and we have the money that we send out. Right, if we send out to another country, then it's gone. Right, so high level. So then for you or me to increase the streams of income we have, when you're looking at these opportunities, it would imply that it would make sense for us to have more swings at the bat. So how do I increase my income? Well, you can see that there's you and me. Right, so that's one stream of income. It's our earned income. But everything else would require you to have some sort of a business, some sort of a business interaction. Now, you could start the business. You could have intellectual property that you give out to a business. So one of my favorite stories is the water soaker guy. It's like a rocket scientist who was like washing his hands, and he said that the water kind of sprayed up in his face. And he thought of the mechanism of having like a high pressure water gun, because before that it was like the dollar store water guns where you just kind of like, and it's like, but he actually had the one where it charges up the air pressure and then shoots it out further. Do you want to guess how much he has made doing that? Do you want to guess? Right, because he did not create a toy business. He just patented and licensed the idea and then gave that to the toy companies to make the toys. So how much do you think he has made with super soakers? Right, and he has made over $100 million. Right, that's absolutely beautiful, right? Like, he had a great idea, he patented it, he kept it, the idea, and then he allowed these things to happen where he's like, all right, I'm going to be able to do that. So when it comes to our, I'm going to scroll this down a little bit. So when it comes to your income, there are seven streams that we all have. And so we recognize that most of us will start with earned income. Forgive my handwriting, right? Most of us will start with earned income. We start in the beginning where we trade our time to get the money, right? We trade the time, we get the money. We then spend the money that we bought with our time, so then we have to trade more time to get back more money. So as we get the money, and then we end up in this circle. Some people call it, right, the hamster wheel. The idea of separating our time from our money means that we have to be able to generate money without giving time, right? So what do we do to get the rest of our time? And I'll normally talk to you all about the three asset classes. So we'll say one is the stock market. Two is going to be your own personal business. And then eventually your goal will be to leverage your business by buying other people's time. Right. So if you have the business, you wear all the hats. Right? You do everything in your company. And then at some point you're able to afford to buy someone else. And then you're able to take some stuff off your plate. And then you're able to add someone else, and you can take more stuff off your plate until there's a point in time that your company just runs without you. And you literally, when we're all gone, the company still exists. So Disney World's like that. Walt Disney, I mean, he's been dead a long time. His kids and family, they're not running that business at all. Not at all. They just have the ownership stock shares that they use, and that generates an income for them. And it generates a lot of income for them. Founder Coca-Cola, same idea, passed a long time ago. The business runs without you, right? So that's eventually where we want to get at with our business. And then three, we have real estate. So if our goal is to, at some point, stop trading our time for money, then at some point we need to actually go out and purchase some other assets where we're not giving our time, but we're actually purchasing one of these three assets. And then someone else will then trade you their money to buy that asset, right? So we need to increase the flow of money, because the money flows either way. So when the money comes to us, but then we spend it, the money comes back and then we spend it, we need to increase where we're on both sides of this circular flow of money. right? If that makes sense. So you start with your earned income. And then we know in the stock market that gives us investment income, which is dividends. We can also invest in companies that pay royalties, or you can have your own royalty, just like the Super Soaker guy. In our own business, we can have profits. So some people will start with their business and they won't ever have the earned income, which is totally fine. And you can start with profits or earned income. That's normally going to be where most of us start at. So you have your profits from your business. We also realize that we can have rental income from our real estate. And then when we're investing, whether at your own local bank or also in the stock market, we could buy bonds and different things like that, and they would pay interest. And then if you hold any asset for a year and a day, your government will allow you to use capital gains instead of it being ordinary income. So if you hold your house for a year and a day, it's considered capital gains, which is generally speaking about half of what your normal taxes are. And then the same with real estate, you hold it for a year and a day, they normally consider that capital gains, right? So these are the other 7 streams. As you can see, you are unable to really access most of the streams of income by trading your time, that you have to start using your money to buy more of your time. So we buy the assets so that we can access the other streams. The good news is you don't have to be a master of all 7. We just need 3. And the fact that you own a business or you're already working and you already have 1 stream. Now, if you're already retired, congratulations. You've already purchased all your time back. You have achieved the goal. So congratulations. You would have been investing at some point along the way in these other asset streams so that you could buy your time. That if you just think about the idea of retiring, you don't have to retire, right? Some people work, but the idea of working where it's not for the money is a beautiful thing. And that is one of those things where I'm like, hey, if you want to work and people want to pay you to work, keep working if you enjoy what you're doing. But if you don't want to work and you're able to purchase your time, you don't have to deal with as much foolishness. And Lord knows there's a lot of foolishness out there. So in our 3 streams, we have about 65% of self-made millionaires have at least 3 streams. That's what the numbers say. I'm going to punish myself by writing millionaires. I think that's right. But if it's not, forgive me. Forgive me if it's not. So we have to, as you see, we have to figure out where we take our money from. The money comes in. So the money comes in, but then we spend the money. The money comes in, but then we spend the money. If we're going to change this circular flow, we need to actually have a percentage of our money that we don't spend in that market, but we put it in our own personal economy. And for most people, the goal ends up being around 20%. Like that's a great goal to get to. It may be 1%, it may be 3%. If it's at a current situation where like, dude, the money that I have and the money that I spend, it's what we need to keep the lights on, then normally a great way to kind of work towards that is, let's say one of 2 things is either one, you would start a side business of some kind, consulting, writing, like Fiverr and different things like that. There are other options for a side business. If the side business doesn't work, you're like, hey, I have kids, I have family, I have lots of commitments, then normally what we like to do is we'll start with your raises. So we're like, hey, look, right, 2025 spending, we're holding it flat, right? Like what we try to tell our government with $40 trillion of debt, we're holding it flat. You got to figure out what to do with everything from here. We would do that with ourselves. We say we're holding it flat. And then if you get a 3% raise next year, that 3% would go towards your personal economy. If you get a 5% raise, even better, personal economy. You're not going to lifestyle creep 1 cent. You're going to maintain the exact same lifestyle, right? And that is another option that's available, right? So if we don't have the time, then we're like, hey, look, I'm working full time. It's very stressful. I have kids and family. Cool. No part-time job, no side gig. But if we get a raise, we're going to put that in the personal economy. And the way that the 20% works is, remember, you work 5 days a week, generally speaking. Obviously, some of you work more. I recognize that. Some of you work less. I recognize that. Just work with me on the example. If you just take Monday's check, that is 20% of your salary. So whatever you make on Monday, that goes towards your personal economy. Whatever you make on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that can go back into the circular flow of money. And then the money just keeps going. Because the idea is, when I have my personal economy and I build it up, I am then able to start receiving the money from it. I give it money, it gives me back money. See, it's all green. I don't have to give any more time for that. And I'm like, man, that's beautiful. So we're going to be looking at the money that we have in, the money that we spend, and the money that we can invest. The money that we come in, if we spend all of it, we have nothing to invest. The money just goes back into someone else's business for their circular flow of money, where they then buy more of our time. And if we want to be able to separate our time from our money, we have to start buying more of our time in our personal economy, which is these three asset classes. But choose your income and then you start building it. As you imagine, it just keeps flowing. I can give you an example before we call it a day, where you can see how the math ends up working in our favor. So let me go back to the black. Hopefully this is making sense. Okay. I'm going to pick a number just to make the math easy for me. So let's say somehow we were able to put away, we'll just make the math easy. So we'll say we could do 10K a year. So we'll say, well, we can put away 10K a year. However that math works out, we put 10K a year away. So then in year one, we have the 10K. In year two, we have another 10K. And then we could say in year three, we have another 10K. Nothing has changed, right? So then that gives us $30,000 that we now have in our personal economy. Well, it's up to you to decide what you would like to do from that point forward. So we know the three asset classes that we talked about, put in the stock market, and then you can just build that. Normally, the first option, we're usually going to choose like a business or real estate because it leverages your money in a different way. You obviously can leverage it in the stock market. There are ways to be able to do that. But normally the idea is if I have the $30,000 that I'm no longer going to just spend, I'm going to invest it. I'm going to see if I can pull up a couple of examples. So I'm in Florida. So let me just see if I can go to, I mean, there's so many different options available, but I will go to like bizbuysell.com, right? So we'll just go there. So this will be one of those options where what we're saying is it gives us the ability to leverage our money in a different way. And what do I mean? I mean that if someone was not literally what would I try to say? I've not vetted any of these options, so I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just simply showing you that there are options available. That if someone was to look at this, just look at the ratios. I put in 60,000. I receive immediately 17,000 the first year, right? Obviously, you got to vet it out and make sure, see what the requirement is of you, of your time, and things like that. This person says that they have $100,000 what they're asking for, and that business will give you $60,000 the first year, right? So you can start seeing how the ROI. Now, granted, many of these may not be interesting to you. Many of these aren't interesting to me, but we're just simply saying, I just put in Florida, went to the site, put in 50,000, get 72. That we can see that the way the ratio works is much more in our favor. Where it's possible, this one's probably not true, but it could be. But when normally you see the same picture, it's more like a little franchise trying to sell you something than a real thing. But anyways, I digress. So it said $30,000 to make 54,000. Again, don't know if that's true. Obviously, people with vending machines make money. My kids put money in the vending machines all the time. But we are simply saying that you can see how the return on your investment for a business is different than the return on your investment in like the stock market or something like that. So whether you purchase the business or whether you leveraged it into real estate. So real estate is normally going to be like a 20% down payment. So that means that we are going to be able to buy a house that is about 150K. Is that what that is? I think, yeah. I think that 20% of that, yeah, I think 20% of that is 150K. I feel like that's about the right number. And so I don't even know if they're gonna do it, but I'm sure you saw in the news they're talking about a 50K or a 50-year mortgage, which basically would mean that you're renting, right? So there's two ways to look at it. One is basically like, I'm never gonna pay this off. I'm basically renting my house from the bank. From the bank's perspective, they're adding a lot more risk by giving you 20 more years to pay them. So it's probably going to be a higher interest rate as far like, you know, right now, if you got a 15-year mortgage, it would be a lower interest rate than a 30-year mortgage. I'd imagine a 30-year mortgage is going to be a lower interest rate than a 50-year mortgage, right? Like just economically high level, that's what I would expect. The play or the assumption on the positive side would be if the dollar keeps losing value, then that means that I'm going to actually be betting against the United States because in 50 years, if I'm still paying this mortgage, that money is going to be like nothing. That mortgage of $2,000 is going to be what people are paying more than that for their car payment because the money has inflated so much. The value of the money has increased so much. And that's not impossible either, because you and I know the price of eggs and cars and everything else, the price of college and healthcare, that the things have gone up a lot. But right, that's the idea. So let's say you get the home for 150. You would then rent it out for about 1,500, 2,000 a month. Oh it's not in the right place. It's supposed to be there. And let's say you clear $1,000 from that. Right. So then on year 4, so we go year 4, I'll have my $10,000 that I'm able to put aside, and then I'm going to be able to add $12,000 from my rental property. Right. So then I'm going to have $22,000 on year 4. And then I'm going to be able to generate my next $10,000 and my other 12,000, and so then I'll be up to 44,000. And you can see that in just 2 years' time, I am now at 44,000. I can then go purchase more real estate, or I can purchase another business. And then if that business does the same thing, where it clears another 1,000 a month, then you can imagine in year 6 you'll have the first 10,000 plus the first property of 12,000 plus the second property of another 12,000. And then you are already sitting there with $34,000 that you're clearing, and you could buy another business or another property that next year, right? You can sort of see how it went from me having to wait 3 to 5 years to me having to wait 2 to 3 years to me if I wanted to. A lot of people, right? You may not want to, but you recognize that the next year I actually am able to generate enough to then buy something else in my personal economy. Now, some people at that moment will say, you know what? I'm tired of trading my time. I'm not going to do whatever the 10,000 thing was, and I'm just going to have my 2 properties. We didn't account for the fact that you're going to be able to charge more to rent as inflation goes up. But I do want to open your eyes to the idea that if there is a circular flow of money, our goal is to increase how many times that money flows into our hand, because the cycle is the same. The money does keep flowing, but how many times does it come into your hands? And that is going to be where you are investing and putting in place where other people's money is flowing to you from your personal economy. Personal economy, money comes to you. You then buy a rental property, and those people are sending you money for you giving them a home. You then buy a business, and those people are giving you money for the product that you're serving. And then you just keep going with the circular flow of money. So hopefully that makes sense, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm thankful for the time that we have together. If you have any questions or you enjoy this, please like it to let me know. And I look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. Have a great rest of your day.